Hi, my name is Jeffrey Henning with ResearchScape International, and today I wanted to give you some of my personal reflections on our algorithmic future, prospering through the research disruption. And when I was a kid, I always loved science fiction, and the Foundation trilogy. He kind of tries to predict he has a character in there who's trying to predict the future based on population patterns. It's architected to understand the long-range future. Ironically, myself as an adult, I started to be more interested in history. Kind of reversing these probably, because it's much easier to predict the future if we look at the history. And so as I talk about the future of survey research in particular, I'm going to look a little bit at some longer trends in terms of history. And the book I picked for history is Collapse, because as Catherine Korstoff of Research Rockstar says, it wouldn't be a market research conference if someone wasn't warning of collapse. So this was a great book that looked at societies around the world and how they failed. So I wanted to give a little bit of personal history to this context of, as we think about our industry and its impact on careers. And this is my great-grandfather with the dark tie, and Carl Frederick Henning. He was a vaudevillian. So vaudeville in the U.S. was a very popular circuit from the 1880s to the 1920s or so, where people would travel the country. Him and his brother were comedians. You couldn't see TV or movies, so you'd go down to your local theater where whichever vaudeville act was in town, you would see them perform. And so, he made a nice little career out of that for a while until the motion pictures came along and the vaudeville stages got turned into motion picture houses. And, all of a sudden the actors went from being sort of a middle-class job that anyone could do to celebrities and a specialty that very few could do, and that ended my great-grandfather's vaudeville career. His son, Carl Glenn Henning, was a radio repairman after World War II. So this is a vacuum tube radio, and so from about 1945 to 1975, he repaired vacuum tube radios for the military, and you can probably guess technology that ended that career and prompted him to early retirement, and that was the transistor radio. So both of their careers were dramatically changed by technology. So personally, I've been doing survey research since about 1987. And if my children were doing this presentation, maybe they'll say that my career was ended by SurveyMonkey, and that was the technology that forced me to change and find some other career. So as we think about the impact of these automated tools, having been in the industry now for 20, 25, 26 years, I've kind of seen the evolution of it, and I'm going to walk you through a little bit of that evolution. So when I first started, we were very excited because we had DOS PCs, and so there were a lot of software tools that were enabling us to be more productive. So we designed the questionnaire, we'd use WordPerfect. We then field the survey, which is where we would do most of our work. Back then, we did a few mail surveys, but I was mainly doing phone surveys. So I would actually write the survey, then I'd call up people to have them take the survey, and then face-to-face surveys. We did a lot of major account surveys. So most of the bulk of my time on a project was actually in the data collection phase, and then we'd analyze the results with 123 and SPSS and present them with WordPerfect, or there was this snazzy first presentation software called Harvard Presentation Graphics. So, but if you think about the human effort, this is just sort of my assessment of the state of the art at different points of time. And really, it was mainly a human effort to do a survey project back then. The survey tools were giving you a little bit of productivity. There was some automation results. If you think of a Katie system for people using a Katie system to tell them what questions to ask. So there was definitely a little bit of automation, but it was primarily a sort of a craft. And then in 1997, I was actually started a company called Perseus, and in September 16th, 1997, we released the first web survey product specifically designed for doing surveys on the web. It was called Perseus Survey Solutions for the Web, and then there was another company that introduced it that same show, that same day, which was called RowSoft Easy Survey. And so those were the first products that were really kind of designed to get rid of that whole data collection phase. So you can design a questionnaire in Word and import it, or you could design it in these tools. You could do a little bit of analysis in these tools, pretty basic. You'd probably still want to be exporting to Excel and SPSS and presenting by then in PowerPoint. But it definitely dramatically changed the scope of work. Now, the human value was maybe about half the value because this automation of data collection, was providing a tremendous cost savings and a tremendous amount of value, which is why we saw online grow so dramatically since then. And then if you flash forward to today, it's really impacted all aspects of the process. If you go to design a questionnaire now, there's incredible libraries of templates that you can start with, so you don't have to write any questionnaire from scratch. There's question libraries that you can search. So a lot of the design of questionnaires, the expertise, even in a product like SurveyMonkey, they've written professional batteries of questions, so a casual person can very easily craft a questionnaire with professional questions. Obviously, the fielding is very automated. You take it forward to some of the products like USAM's Instantly or Luna's Quick Surveys, where all the panels built in, and you just specify who you want, pay, and the whole fielding is automated from the credit card to the full data collection. So you don't even have to have a list to email anymore. And then the results from these products have become more and more rich in terms of giving you some basic analysis, some frequency tables and so forth in detail, and often some other insights. And then they even have tools to present the results as PowerPoint becomes less popular. People like to log in. You can have your clients log in and see what the results are. So as we think about the value in this equation, the human value for a survey project is much less. Now, a lot of it is driven by automation. So if you try to predict them forward, you can imagine that trend's only going to continue. And some of the areas where I see further automation, if you look at the analysis side, weighting has traditionally been done by an analyst, having to kind of make the decisions, and then maybe the tool can support the decisions. Traditionally, you've just kind of seen frequency charts and crosstabs, but the crosstabs are showing you everything, so it's kind of a banner of the main questions you want to look at all the other questions by, and it's showing you the meaningful differences, but it's showing you every single thing. And the open-ended coding traditionally hasn't really been, that's been an area that's been slower to be automated. So basically you just have lists of all the open-ended comments to review, maybe a word chart, but nothing particularly advanced there. Really requires a lot more human value still. But all that's changing. So we look at automatic weighting now, and Google Consumer Surveys is one of the first to use automatic weighting. Here you can see two charts, same survey, where they've weighted by their inferences on age, gender, and region based on your browser behavior. So here's a survey where they collected 1,500 responses. They're only including 1,000 responses where they can guess that for those. Those guesses aren't very good, but as a weighting measure, I think using the guesses as a weighting measure is okay. I think you're going to see, because of this sort of trend automatic weighting, I think you're going to see more weighting in the future and better weighting instead of on deferred demographics, on stated demographics and so forth. So another area where analysts traditionally added value is going to be completely handled by the system. And another example from Google, I have a couple examples from Google here, is their insights, what they call, which is they basically do correlations, look for relationships between the survey questions and the inferred demographics. So here they've looked at 339 of those relationships between questions, and they're telling you, hey, we expect there to be some false discoveries, but here's what we found based on that. So this was on a survey on tipping, and people in the U.S. Northeast tipped more than 15% more than those in the U.S. Midwest. So now the human doesn't even have to read or look through those 339 tables relating those two questions. They're being told the ones that are the most insightful. Again, I think this is early days, and I actually don't think the quality of this is very good because it's relying still on inferred demographics, which are often inaccurate. But it's another sign point in the direction that this is trending. And then my last Google example is for short open ends, they'll actually group them. And so here we have Modern Family, Seinfeld. These are what are your favorite shows? Big Bang, The Big Bang. So they've based on their search database, understanding how things are related. They've managed to tie some of these together. Some of them are as simple as saying, well, Mike and Molly with an ampersand is the same as Mike and Molly without an ampersand. Two Broke Girls is the same, whether it's a number or not. Some of them are more sophisticated. Saturday Night Live with SNL. Is so they recognize SNL as an abbreviation for that. So they've done some nice work there. If you do go through this, there's still some human work that needs to be done, but it's a very it's a pretty good tool for the first draft. And then one of the other trends that we see as we look at other vendors, at other providers. So Survey Analytics has this dashboarding tool where I just had a project where basically, after we create the analysis, we need to share it with 200 retail store managers who each need to view it just for their retail store. And this tool will automatically handle the filtering by store, so it makes it really easy to basically create a master report that then 200 people will get their unique view of. So you can imagine how much time and effort that would save over the old method, and then the store managers can run their own analyses. So even less work for the human. And there's a lot of room for creativity as you think about some of this automation. There's different proprietary analytical techniques. This is from Forbes Consulting in Boston. So they want to measure your emotional reaction to a retail experience or something else. So they'll actually have you take a quick survey on your phone where you'll basically be shown about 60 pictures in 60 seconds, and you just have to click on the picture if it helps reflect the mood that you're in. And then they've classified this library of pictures, and so they infer your emotions better than if you told them, how you feel. And you can see they have some, I'm mystified, I'm contented, I'm enchanted. So these different emotions that derive from your answers. So completely unique and proprietary, but still they ended up automating it. So a way for them to kind of cope with this increasing automation and commoditization of the survey research project is to come up with a unique tool such as this. And then, even though they're market researchers, hire a programmer and automate it. So as we think about all of these trends, if you carry them forward into the future, you can imagine all of them getting better. I talked about the weighting. We'll see much better weighting, I think, in the future than the tools today provide. Raking, where you're iteratively weighting until it matches a target population. Crowd-shaped surveys. So we're seeing more of these where early responses are incorporated into what later respondents see, and so now they're seeing something a little more sophisticated than a survey, a little more qualitative. Text analytics of long verbatims, that's probably something that's more on the 5 years out. Right now, you still have to do a lot of coding and work around that domain specific, but those libraries are getting better and better, and so eventually, that work for humans will be easier to do. Ironically, some of the leading edge companies are having humans do it, but they're having humans do it through things like Mechanical Turk, where they've split up, the 1,000 verbatims and had people randomly go through and code them, and have multiple people code them. So they've incorporated the human in the loop in an automated fashion. I think you'll see even better statistical systems for identifying relationships between questions, sort of what we've seen hinted at by Google, but now think of that for not just those inferred demographics, but for any question. Think about using, knowing if you should be using a t-test or a correlation or a ranked correlation, having those decisions made by the systems. Proprietary analytics, whether it's like the example I showed about inferring emotion, that's, I think, an area where a lot of people have to become creative to think about what's going to make them stand out in terms of their methodology. And really what's driving this is you've got over 100 software tool vendors on the market, and they're all competing. And so from this competition, they're all trying to do more and more to make the experience of their users better and better. So you're going to just see further and further automation to this. So I think, if you flash forward into 2018, you're going to have pretty much turnkey solutions that, the humans picking some questions up front, maybe writing a couple custom ones, but drawing them from the library, guiding a little bit of the analysis, but a lot of it is just done by the software. So, what do you think if you're a survey researcher in terms of how do you deal with that? How do you move forward yourself in continuing to practice this profession? And as there's a ton of areas of innovation possible for the vendors, there's also a lot of areas of innovation possible for us as researchers. And so here are some ideas I've come up with by each phase of the project. So if you're designing a questionnaire, developing a proprietary index, some measure that you think is superior for the industry or domain that you're surveying. I like, for instance, Ipsos's share wallet measure that they've come up with. That's their proprietary take on it. Integrates, it can work with NPS or customer sat. So coming up with some proprietary measure that's going to add value. Pioneering new questioning techniques, like the example from Forbes where they're picking these images. There's lots of creative things we can do with the web. Look at some of the things that Brain Juicer does in terms of picking a person's face, or laddering, where they're automating laddering based on previous responses. So the traditional researcher, to be a little more different, has to think more like a web programmer. What are the capabilities that shopper, retail space, shopper things? Maybe there's something like that for e-commerce, for instance. So unique interfaces, so thinking more like a programmer, and I'm sure as you think about it, you might pick up some other ideas for where to add value for designing questionnaires. For fielding the survey, one thing I think that's happening is researchers face competition from these tool vendors and from panel companies who have taken more and more of the value of a survey research project. I had a project that I was bidding on where basically the panel costs were basically going to be about 80% of the value of the project. So one of the things that I've done in my own work is I have a panel of U.S. consumers that I've built simply so that for general population studies, I could do that more affordably than having to rely on the outside panel vendors who I now use for niche populations. So that's one technique. There are so many systems out there that you can think of them as power tools, and if you're a professional carpenter, you're learning how to use all these power tools. So really understanding the enterprise feedback management systems that are available, pushing them past what end users traditionally do. Custom programming. So there's certainly times where, as powerful as these systems are, people have a unique need that is typically programmed in JavaScript or a little bit of server-side scripting. So again, part of our algorithmic future is thinking more like programmers. So how do we do some custom programming around these systems? Qualitative exercises. The great news if you're a quality, which I'm not really talking about too much today, is a lot of the qualitative work is hard to automate, whether it's the dynamic interviewing process in a qualitative study, to analyzing the results and really figuring out what's representative when doing qualitative analysis. Crowd-shaped surveys I had mentioned earlier. Then analyzing the results, again, qualitative analysis I think will be an area where humans continue to add value, becoming a power user of high-end analytical systems, building a database of benchmarks. So there was a presentation at the MRA from the Market Research Association in the U.S., their corporate research conference, from FindLaw, a company that just specializes in building websites for lawyers. And you can imagine that they would build a database of, say, website satisfaction for legal websites, so that they can then, have the survey is pretty standard, but the value is understanding how you compare to others in your market. Automating some of those proprietary techniques, so it wasn't enough to come up with that neat MindSight emotional photo technique. You have to actually program it and program the analytics. Analyzing with business metrics. Most systems are not they treat every survey sort of as a self-contained survey. They're not tying it into business performance, sales performance, and so tying in those metrics is a place to continue to add value. And then presenting the results. I think we have to really be creative There are some programs that will spit out infographics. They tend to be pretty poor today, so I think developing good infographics remains a human task. And then when you have workshops with clients where they're internalizing the research and presenting, to really engage with the data and so that they can then operationalize it, that's obviously always going to be a human-centered task. So those are areas where we can compete with our robot masters. So my question for you to think about is, what will you do? If you're a survey researcher, what are areas where you can innovate and differentiate yourselves from things that are becoming increasingly automated? And just to bring it full circle, so I talked about my ancestors, my kids, their occupations. My one son's a U.S. Marine, so sadly that's a profession that we will always need. 200+ year organization. But my other son is his twin brother is a roboticist. So if you can't beat him, join him. He programs and builds robots. So part of embracing our algorithmic future, is learning how we can be the masters of these techniques, and think of ourselves not just as researchers, but as programmers, as people automating some of our knowledge, so that we can provide it to add value while differentiating ourselves. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope this gave you some things to think about as you contemplate your own career and your own future path. So reach out to me at Twitter, jhenning, or jhenning@researchscape.com.